Card scrapers are absolutely useless. They're just rectangular pieces of metal. They're supposed to be sharp, but they don't even have a bevel. Don't buy them until you understand what's involved, because out of the package, they don't cut, they don't shave, but sharpened correctly, they're one of the most powerful smoothing tools in the shop. Today, you and I are going to make scraper burrs make sense. Card scrapers are not blades. They don't have bevels like a knife or a chisel. Instead, they rely on something called a burr, a tiny hook formed by rolling over the edge. That burr is the cutting edge. It's what makes the scraper actually remove wood instead of just dusting the surface. In my hands, I've got a brand new card scraper straight from Amazon. Never been used, never been sharpened. Let's open it up and see what we're actually working with. What you're looking at is blue spring steel. It's thin, very hard, and flexible. This one is 0.025 inches thick, which is on the lighter side, so it's easier on the wrists when you flex it. But here's the thing, right now, this scraper won't do anything. It won't cut, it won't shave, it won't scrape. It's just steel. Let's bring the microscope over and take a closer look at these edges. If we look at the edge, you can see that it's a square 90-degree corner. There's nothing there. If you were to try to use this on a piece of wood right now, you'd get nothing but dust. But now let's look at a scraper with a burr on it. You can see that the edge has been deformed and that there is a burr right here on the edge that I can hit with a little ruler. Scrapers, for the most part, are never ready when you get them. Let's look at a chisel or a plane iron. To make a sharp point on either of these, we grind away steel until we form a bevel. This bevel is a smooth slope that leads to a fine edge, like sharpening a knife. It really is all about control, precision, and alignment. This technique to remove metal into a sharp point has been around since the beginning of time. But the scraper throws all of this out the window. You're not fine-tuning and polishing anything. Instead, you're mashing the edge and deforming it in a very destructive way to create a hook that can be used to scrape. This hatchet has been hammered on the backside so many times, the steel has started to mushroom. You can very easily see how the steel is deformed, curling and folding over itself along the edge. That's exactly what we're doing, intentionally, on a smaller scale with the card scraper. But here's the catch. That edge lives a short, fragile life. It wears out faster than a chisel or a plane blade because it's not a solid wedge. It's a delicate fragment curled from the corner of the steel. With a sharpened scraper, I can feel a sharp burr, but it's not very durable. A single swipe of a hardened file is all it takes to damage the burr. Now, one complaint I've seen from reviews on Amazon is that the scraper doesn't stay sharp very long. But there isn't a scraper out there that can withstand hours of abuse. They will lose their edge very quickly. But here's the good news. Since each 90-degree edge can be deformed, it means you have two edges on this side and two edges on this side, but also technically two edges here and two edges over here. While you'll probably never use either side, it does mean I have 8 edges I can create before I go to work. Scrapers stand in their own league as they bridge the gap between blades and sandpaper. Blades slice and sandpaper scratches, but card scrapers glide. They remove material thinner than a blade can cut, faster than sandpaper can grind. But what's remarkable is that these tools are older than the sandpaper we use today, and they might be the best kept secret in the shop. Let's talk first about what sandpaper actually does. Sandpaper uses a fine grit to grind down the surface. You start with a lower grit and work your way up. With each step, you remove the scratches, and you take off a little bit less wood than the one before it. That's the goal. Each grit erases the damage left by the previous one until the scratches are so small they're hard to see. But here's the thing, those fibers on the surface, they're not cleanly cut but actually fractured and frayed. Those damaged fibers are what creates the insidious raised grain effect. As soon as the water base hits the finish, they swell up and stand proud, like this rice here in a cup. The surface you thought was smooth now feels fuzzy and rough, like you never sanded at all. You might think, well, I'll just sand it even finer. But that brings another problem. At extremely fine grits, you risk burnishing the surface, compressing or polishing the fibers until they're too smooth for finishes to soak in. You didn't raise the grain this time, but you sealed the door shut for your finish. But scrapers, they work much differently. They slice the fibers clean like a blade, not a grinder. And because a scraper cuts those fibers cleanly, instead of just crushing or fracturing them, it would mean fewer fibers standing up when you apply a finish. In my research, I've seen a lot of woodworkers say they get even more absorption and fewer raised grain issues because of that. So I thought we could test it. I have 3 pieces here that I cut from a piece of red oak. I'll sand my first one up to 180. My second one will be scraped, and the third one will be sanded to 320. I'll add a water dye to the top of all 3, let it soak for a few seconds, and wipe it off. As we start this, everything looks good. My 320 is obviously much lighter than the other two examples as the surface was burnished. So far, so good. We'll take a microfiber rag with a microphone and drag it across all three surfaces. 320, as expected, is very smooth. There is still a little bit of friction. I can hear some of the fibers that are sticking up. With 180, I can hear some raised grain. I'm really not surprised by this. 180 is obviously not enough to keep the grain from rising. Now it's time to check the scraped one. Everything rests on this block. Wow, that's not what I was expecting. The scraper didn't reduce it, it actually made it worse. But there's a much more important nugget that came out of all of this. Before we get into it, we need to go back to sanding. When we sand, we're grinding and pulverizing the fibers one thin layer at a time. And then we use our hands to decide when a surface is finished, based on how smooth it feels. The problem that comes out of this, and it's a big one, is that we lose visual quality. Looking at all three of my samples again, my 320 grit is smooth. The surface is very clear. It's actually second best in terms of visual clarity. But that smoothness comes at a cost. Dyes sit more shallow and protective finishes tend to float on top of the surface instead of soaking in. My 180 sample absorbed the color easily, but the surface detail is the dullest of the three. The crushed fibers hide the grain. It's still beautiful, but it's 1080p compared to the 4K look of the scrape piece. There's more shimmer in the quarter sawn medullary rays. The surface feels alive. And that's what scraping does. You're slicing the fibers on the surface, which gives you a much cleaner look with your stock. And it's not just about the way the wood looks when you're done. You're not spending hours working through grit progressions, buying pads with a short lifespan, or kicking up dust clouds. The steel in a card scraper costs less than a pack of sandpaper, and it lasts as you're only using a microscopic amount each time to form a burr. This is where scrapers become irreplaceable. With tricky grain like walnut, you end up grinding away the soft parts and barely touching the rest. That's how you get low spots. But a scraper doesn't care. It cuts everything evenly, no matter how wild the grain is. This is why you really need to have a card scraper. But before we move on, I can't leave you hanging with that raised grain issue. Here's a fixed piece that I scraped that has no problems with raised grain. And it starts out like this. I'll first start off by scraping. You always want to scrape with the grain. Just like sanding, I'll add a little bit of water to the surface to allow the grains to rise. Now that it's dry, I'm going to flip the piece. You never want to go against the grain, but for light passes, very light passes, and a new burr, I find it knocks off the raised grain quickly. And just like that, I'm ready for my water dye. With the what and the why behind us, let's focus on how the burr is made. In my opinion, it's actually easier to create than a razor sharp edge on a blade. I know other channels like to flex with expensive waterstones, diamond plates, and oils, but we're going to keep this simple. Just like the card scraper itself, this process has always worked simply for hundreds of years, so why change it? If you're just starting out, you need a flat file, a burnisher, and the scraper to get you going. You should be able to get all three for about $30. I have a single cut mill file here. It's very fine. I can actually run my fingers across it without it biting. And that's really important, as a file that's too coarse could damage the edge and ruin your scraper. You're going to want to clamp your card scraper upright. I'm using a bench vise here, but if you don't have one, don't worry. Just sandwich and clamp it between a couple 2x4s and then clamp that to your table and you're good to go. This card scraper is brand new, but I'm still going to square it up. It's just a good mindset to have with scraping in general. Anytime you're prepping to add a new burr, you want a nice clean edge to work from. And let me tell you, if that edge isn't square, your burr's not gonna work. I've learned this the hard way, and I've wasted so much time trying to get a scraper to cut. The jig I made to reset a card scraper is incredibly easy to make. All you need is a 2x4 and a table saw. Because of time, I did make a separate video showing exactly how to build it. You'll find that linked in the description down below and at the end of this video. But here's how it works. A file slides into a kerf in the block like this. Then there's this diagonal cut on the side, and this is where we're going to insert the scraper. I'm going to slide this right on the top. I'm just going to work this back and forth until I clean up the corner. I'll flip it on the other side and then do it as well. It's just a matter of working it back and forth now, making sure that I get it all cleaned off. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the diagonal side down so that my file is sitting right up on top, and I'm going to go back and forth. And this will make sure that if it's rounded, that I've got a nice flat top. When you feel it, it does kind of have like a sharp corner. That's what you want. This whole process literally takes me less than a minute and I'm ready to go again. So it does not take a long time doing this. Making the burr is the easiest part of all of this. I'm going to lower the scraper into the vise so that there's about a 1/4 inch to maybe a 1/2 inch sticking up. With my round file, or if you have a burnisher, I'm going to take this and rest it at an angle like this. And what I like to do is just put my finger along my vise and just kind of guide it as I'm using it. I'm gonna press it down just like this and go back and forth. I'm gonna feel for a burr, and already I can feel a burr. Again, if this is square, if this is nice and square, it doesn't take hardly any time at all to add that burr. You can control how aggressive your burr is by adjusting the angle and how many times you stroke the top. If you hold the burnisher flatter, you'll get a finer, more delicate burr, which is great for finishing cuts. Tip it down a little bit more and you'll raise a heavy burr that has a strong bite, but just so that you know, a heavier burr won't last long. When I have one side done, I'll come to the other side and do the same thing. And a good way to feel this is just to tap it. It's almost like a guitar string when you get a nice curl on it. I think we're done. We'll take it over to the cherry and try it out and see how it works. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find where it catches on the wood, and that's the angle I know to use to scrape. Now, if you're working with a harder steel like the Sheffield, it might take a few more passes to get the burr to show up. That's normal. As long as your burnisher is harder than the scraper, it'll happen, and actually, the burr tends to hold up longer once it's there. You've made the burr, but even if it's perfect, there's still technique involved. Like everything in the shop, it comes down to feel. Scrapers are unlike any other tool in the shop. They take a little time to get used to, but when they work, you'll feel it and you'll appreciate it. There's a lot of misinformation out there about these tools, and I want to cut through all of that. So before we wrap up, let me share 5 things I wish someone had told me when I started scraping. These will save you frustration and help you actually enjoy using the tool. I want you to love this tool as much as I do. You might have seen videos showing big curls coming off a scraper, but those are not realistic. Unlike a hand plane, a scraper doesn't have a sole to ride the surface. You guide it entirely by hand, which means the cut is based on feel, not a precise depth. It's a finishing tool meant to highlight the grain. If it's making light shavings and not dust, it's working. Scrapers come in different shapes and thicknesses for different jobs. You'll see curved edges designed for inside profiles or tight corners where sandpaper can't reach. As for thickness, thinner scrapers flex more, giving you control for detailed work, while thicker ones stay flatter and are better for leveling large surfaces. It's worth having a few different ones once you get comfortable with the basics. Unfortunately, scrapers can't completely take place of sandpaper. They're extremely effective in hardwoods with tight grain and dense fibers, but in softwoods they can leave fuzzy spots. A lot of times the edge just doesn't have enough bite into it and you'll find yourself creating dust instead of curls. Cherry, maple, oak, or walnut scrapers are magical. Use it with pine, aspen, or poplar, and you might be disappointed. Scrapers can get very hot enough to actually burn you. My AccuBurr scraper came with a magnet you place on the face of the scraper to protect your thumbs. But you still have to check the edge with a finger and see how hot it's getting. The cooler you keep the hook, the longer the burr will stay sharp. So here's a little trick I came up with. Take the magnet and add an arrow pointing down. When you've used it for a bit, flip the magnet to the top edge and use that. After that, move it to the back side of the scraper, flipping it again to the other side. And then flip it one last time and use this side. Because all 4 sides can be sharp, you're basically just rotating this and keeping those edges cool. I've noticed that I can drastically protect the sharpness and make my scrapers last much longer. Finally, always scrape with the grain just like hand planes. And it's really easy to find the grain direction with cloth or just even your shirt. Feel for catches, listen for rough patches, and then slice the opposite direction. Unlike sanders that don't care about edges, it can be really difficult to scrape the start of a board. With hand planes, you have a starting rest on the sole you can guide the blade across. Scrapers don't have that, but angle a scraper and it's much easier to start. Card scrapers are misunderstood, and I get why. They're a strange tool. No handle, no bevel, no instructions. Today's MIMS was sparked by all the bad reviews I found online. Most of them said the same thing. It wasn't sharp. It dulled too quickly. It didn't work. And the thing is, they weren't wrong. They just didn't know what the tool needed from them. I hope this video helps shed a little light on what makes scrapers so powerful and so confusing. Give one a try. Once you dial it in, you might never reach for sandpaper again. Thank you so much for watching. Tag the like and subscribe if this helped you out. A huge thank you to my patrons who help keep this work going. If you'd like to be a part of the team, or just throw a tip in the jar, there's a link in the description. And remember to keep making things.